We are live and recording.
Are you going to broadcast, Val?
You are broadcasted,
Okay.
and you're recording.
Well, good afternoon. It's Tuesday, April 14th, 2020, and you are logged in to the Washington Academy of General Dentistry Stay Home, Stay Healthy CE series. This is a series of webinars that we've put together. We've reached out to some of our colleagues and asked them if they would donate their time and their content, and we've had really good reception for doing that. So we've got about 5 or 6 minutes before we'll actually get rolling here before Dr. Kwiecien does his presentation. I invite you to take a look at the slides that are going by with upcoming webinars that we are featuring. We've got some really good speakers coming up, and you can access all those speakers at www.washingtonagd.org, or please use the QR codes that are on those flyers that are going by. For those of you that are concerned about CE credit, CE verification will be emailed to each and every one of you that registered using the email address you registered at. For AGD members, we will be submitting your CE directly to the Academy of General Dentistry, but please do not expect that to show up on your transcript for at least 2 to 4 weeks. The AGD is really backed up with all the webinars and all the CE content that's going on right now. we'd like to thank our sponsors that are making this webinar series possible. The Washington Academy of General Dentistry, the University of Washington School of Dentistry Student AGD Chapter, the University of Washington CE Department, and Comet USA, the Canadian Academy of Restorative Dentists and Prosthodontics, and also our local dental societies, Seattle King County Dental Society, Snohomish County Dental Society, Pierce County Dental Society. Thank you for all your support. We'd like to welcome the AGD members from Texas, Arkansas, and California that are now receiving our flyers and email information. Again, the QR codes are there to help you get registered for the CE. All CE is free to all dentists, assistants, hygienists, staff members that want to partake of it. You do not need to be an AGD member to gain CE credit. We'd like you to see what we're doing out there and know that the AGD is an organization that's really focused on continuing education and helping the general dentist to grow right from the first day of dental school to that time that you turn over the keys to someone else. Just want to also mention, with those of you that are new to the Zoom format, today in the chat feature, please do not ask questions. Please do not ask the question, when is my CE going to be available? Is this CE available on a webinar being recorded, etc.? Yes, these are being recorded. You can access recordings of these webinars on YouTube at the Washington Academy of General Dentistry. That's our YouTube page, and those are going up rather fast. In fact, we already have Dr. Leanne Brady from this morning's webinar up. Dr. Steve Rasner's will be up pretty soon, as will Judy K. Massoff. So we're getting those out to you quite quickly now. And thank you for your support and going to that website. Make sure you like and subscribe to the WAGD channel. That'll help us get you your content quicker as it becomes available. Back to the Zoom interface. If you have a question today for Dr. Kwiecien, we're going to use the Q&A function, okay? You'll find that down on your toolbar there. Please put your questions there. If you have a question, please type it in there. Yes, statements are okay in that Q&A box, but we'll be primarily trying to direct questions to Dr. Kwiecien. So we can't get to everybody's questions. We can't get to everybody's comments, but we'll do our best. So thank you for joining us. I want to thank our executive director, Valerie Bartoli, who's helped put this webinar series together. Dr. Gary Hiyamoto for being one of our panelists. Thank you very much for all the effort with the to the WAGD Executive Council Board for the efforts that they're putting into the website. We appreciate it. So we're coming up on the hour here, and we'll just take a look at how many we have logged on. We have about 300 logged in right now, so we'll just give it a minute longer before we get rolling with the introductions. And again, tomorrow, the Brays are back doing a presentation on COVID-19 and update on relief provisions. We also have Dr. Yassine doing a presentation on peri-implantitis from 1 o'clock to 2 o'clock p.m. At 3 o'clock p.m., you don't want to miss this webinar, Multiple Implants in the Aesthetic Zone. This is absolutely awesome presentation by Dr. Ralph Schuler. I saw a couple of years ago at the IAG meeting in Tucson, Arizona. Just wonderful. Lois Banta is with us on Thursday, April 16th. This is a friend, Judy Kay, that spoke just an hour ago. And Dr. Bruce Cassius is going to join us on Thursday for talking about lasers. Jian Kim is going to talk about black triangle closures on Thursdays. And again, your CE verification will be emailed to you. So we'll put that together. Omni has another webinar series for us, Leadership Through Crisis, HR in Your Dental Practice, this Friday. Dr. Yassine's Implant Study Club will be starting this Friday afternoon from 12 to 2. Various speakers will be joining him each week. Hey, thank you, John Nasty. Friday, April 17th, 2:30 to 4. This is another great lecture. Ian McNichol from Wheel Media was helping us out. What marketing should you be doing during COVID-19? Another friend of Judy Kay's, Janice Hurley, is joining us on Tuesday. And a big favorite of mine, Dr. Tazir Suleiman. You're going to love this lecture. He's put together a bleaching lecture that is going to kind of separate the wheat from the chaff, and looking forward to somebody that is knowledgeable as him speaking on this subject. Okay, well, let's get rolling here. Again, I'd like to thank our sponsors. Washington Academy of General Dentistry, University of Washington School of Dentistry, CE, Comet USA, the Seattle King County Dental Society, Pierce County Dental Society, Snohomish County Dental Society, Patterson Dental, and the Canadian Academy of Restorative Dentists and Prosthodontics. So without, we'll start moving forward here. I'd like to introduce Dr. Kevin Kwiecien. Dr. Kwiecien graduated from Oregon Health and Science University School of Dentistry in 1995 and holds a master's degree in healthcare administration. He has more than 25 years of private practice experience, with most of those years overlapping in academia. Before joining Spear Education full-time from 2014 to 2017, Dr. Kwiecien served as Assistant Professor of Restorative Dentistry at Oregon Health and Sciences University, where his roles included Director of the university's faculty dental practice, as well as Course Director of Preclinical Fixed Prosthodontics and Co-Course Director of Advanced Restorative Concepts. Dr. Kwiecien's dedication to high-level continuing education began with Frank Spear in 2001. Shortly thereafter, he completed the curriculum at LD Pankey Institute. He has over a decade of national and international lecturing and workshops. Dr. Kwiecien is an adjunct faculty member at Western University of Health Science College of Dental Medicine, directing the practice management curriculum. He also serves as a faculty member at the LD Pankey Institute and dedicates the majority of his time as the owner of K-Squared Facilitation and Dental Education, facilitating long-term health for the practice, team, and the patient. Dr. Kwiecien, I'm going to stop sharing my slides here. Welcome, sir, and thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm super honored to be here. In just a second, I'll go ahead and share my screen. But I did want to take a minute and thank you for doing this. Thank you, WAGD, for doing this. It's an interesting time, and I think that the more we actually genuinely give back and have no hidden agendas, is what fills my heart. And I know that's what you do and what pretty much all of us on this are doing. So it's because we really care. So Timmy, Val, Gary, thank you so much for doing this. I think it's spectacular. So, and I hope I don't let you down. So I think we have a little bit, we have about an hour here, probably be, you know, a little less than that as we go through this. I was asked to talk about, you know, identifying and refining your core systems while away from the office. Now, this is a big topic. And I look at all the different names that Timmy was showing, and there's a lot of overlap in content. I think that's a good thing. And the people I know or know about who are doing this, I think that it is very congruent overlap. I think that we can take and combine a lot of what we're learning and say, oh, well, Kevin said that about internal marketing, and Judy said this, or, you know, Somebody else said that. So my hope is that it makes sense, that it doesn't confuse you. That's my hope for you, and that's my desire in the time we have together today. So thanks for having me. That said, as far as confusing you or not confusing you and not feeling so overwhelmed, this is a pyramid that started years ago. It started probably back in the day of Mike Schuster and came through the Schuster Center in Arizona, and has been used by so many of us and changed and evolved. But basically, this is our practice. So the bottom part of the pyramid, it has to do with money, and we can't have a business unless we can afford the business. So then we can't really keep the business going unless we have some leadership. Well, we can't really keep the business going long term if we don't communicate with each other and then have a vision and leave a legacy. What I want you to know is that today, we're going to mostly be spending our time on this part of the pyramid. So again, we have about an hour together, and I want to use it for what makes most sense, reminding you that this is a small part of the big picture, but that doesn't mean that we don't work on it and work on it with intention. Another pyramid, speaking of pyramids, this is a pyramid that one of my really good friends, Sherry Kay, came up with as she looks at practices, and we sort of do we have a lot of similar values and ideas with practices. And really, we see at the bottom of the pyramid, we've got to have some kind of a vision all the way up to the top of your success. Today, we're really just sitting here hanging around in the middle, talking about what you might call SOSs, or standard operating systems, or SOP, standard operating procedures. And we're going to pick 7 of those. And what happens is a lot of people think, well, dentists, don't you know this? I mean, come on, you're a dentist. If you understand the technical work of the business, you must understand the business that does the technical work. And of course, that is a fatal assumption. If you've read or heard about the E-myth by Gerber, Gerber talks about the technician. That's what most of us right now that are sitting together on Zoom are. Most of us are technicians. It's our skill, it's our craft. We're honing it in. However, if we have a business, and a lot of us on this call today do, we actually have to have some foresight, some vision out there, some entrepreneurial skills so that we can keep our business growing and evolving. Most of us aren't awesome at that, but that's part of what we do. And then of course, the other part is we are the manager. We manage our teams. We manage the finances. We do a lot of different managerial skills in our practices. And what Gerber says is pretty much we're all good at probably one of those, and we're okay at the other 2. Now, there of course are some dentists who, and this is not a diss to those dentists, there are some dentists that we all know who are probably better entrepreneurs than they are dentists. I'm not saying they're bad dentists. I'm saying they've got this natural gift, this talent to be entrepreneurs, and some have these amazing people skills. They're probably a better manager than they are an entrepreneur, than they are a technician. That's their skill. That means we've got to develop the other 2. We continue to develop the one that comes more naturally to us, or the one we put our work into. But we've got to look at the other 2 very intentionally. And that's part of creating systems in the office. You see, there are 3 key areas in the business, and they all work in harmony. We wish we could separate everything into just look at 1 thing, 2 things, and 3 things, put them into silos, sort of like this. We wish that it really was just operations, which would include things like new patient management, patient retention, team management, quality control, and then time management. You think, well, heck, that sounds like my dental practice, except this other silo, if it were really a silo, again, we would talk about internal and external marketing. And we've got this other silo, we wish it was a silo, where we actually have to look at the business itself, budget controls, financial policy, fee setting, collection activities, how do we get our money, and then what do we expect to get, what are our goals? Well, as most of you know, those are all connected. We wish that our practices were just this smooth rolling system, this wheel that just kept on going. But what we know is the way our new patient flow goes might have a correlation or a connection to the way we do financial arrangements. Well, we know that the way our new patient goes, which might have a connection with financial arrangements, might go with how we actually do our scheduling. Well, we know with how we do our new patient flow with how we do our financial arrangements, and the way we block schedule might have to do with the way we do our recare. Well, we know that the way, and so you see the idea here that it's all connected. This is systems thinking. This is your system as your practice, how it's all interrelated. And some of you right now are saying, well, Kevin, where is it? You just make all this up? And what I want to spend a couple minutes before we move on to systems thinking and then looking at systems to sort of, I guess, reinforce and thank you for what Timmy said. A lot of you know that I live here now. I live up here in the Pacific Northwest. I didn't always live in the Pacific Northwest, but it's interesting how time comes around. And my story is that probably back in the early 2000s, it started up here in the Pacific Northwest, this sort of journey I'm on, which was when I came up and started listening to Frank and started learning that, man, there was a lot more to know in dentistry than I thought. I mean, of those three things that Gerber talks about, I got to tell you, I sucked at all of them. I couldn't pick one that I was good at. I wish there was one that came naturally to me, but there wasn't. And one of my friends said, Kevin, you sort of suck, so you should probably go up and learn something from somebody smart. So I started traveling up here from Portland. And that's where I went to dental school, was at OHSU in Oregon. So I've tend to have a connection with the Pacific Northwest. But after I finished going through the curriculum there, that is, Timmy said, I went down to Pankey and I went through the curriculum there from about 03 to about 06, I think it was, in about 3 years. It was at that point where I learned, and this is what I want to talk to you a little bit about today. There's going to be sort of a theme through it about community. And that is that this is when I had my first study club, a study club that was mentored by some amazing people, and the community that we created to support each other is what we're doing here today. It's what the WAGD is doing for you today. It's what started to fill my heart and fill my soul. It was a safe place for me to learn, which really helped enhance my learning, and it helped me get good at least one of those circles, if not two, and maybe the end three. But as I started incorporating this into my practice more and more, because I had this safe place, I had this group to help grow with, I was asked to start sharing that back where I went to dental school at OHSU. And another weird story that you'll see as it goes on here today is, as I started sharing my the things I've learned and the way I was integrating it into my practice at the dental school, I ended up taking a master's course in healthcare and management. So everything from leadership to communication to project management to finance, got everything specifically with healthcare. So I did that very intentionally because I knew I wanted to know more, and I knew it was going to help me in the future. There was sort of a path I was moving towards. And it was at this point, oh, and by the way, what I wanted to say was, one of the reasons I took that master's course was thanks to Gary Kyoto, who at that time was the dean of the dental school at Oregon, who again has always had my back and has always supported me. And it's funny because now I'm up here and he's now the dean at UW, and we've been in communication. And so I wouldn't be here today, I don't think, without Gary and Gary's support of helping me get some formal education. It was at this point, however, that I was about to either move into academia or maybe start a business that I have right now. And that was when I got asked to go to SPEAR full-time, SPEAR Education down in Scottsdale. So I basically put everything on hold and I went down there. And it's funny because as the world evolves, and when I left SPEAR, I just sort of went back to doing what I was going to do before I went to SPEAR, which is to start my own business, because it just makes sense for me. It's something I never had an eye on. It has just evolved. And that's what, as I share with you today, these systems we're going to talk about, I want you to know that it's just sort of evolved. And it's what I hope for my kids and your kids, is that you sort of trust your passion and keep moving in the direction that makes most sense. I have the good fortune right now in my business, not only to work with teams on a regular basis and dentists, but to work with really cool people and companies to do some really exciting things. A lot of things were right before this pandemic hit, but I trust that they're going to come back and we're going to have a spectacular future. But for the most part, every day, this is what I do now. I work with dentists and I work with teams and help contribute to hopefully enhancing everybody's lives. The last thing I want you to know is there's a little bias for today. And the bias is that I am somewhat health-centered. I have kids who we've always, and I am a family person as well. I have a couple of kids, and my daughter ended up 5 or I guess years ago now getting married, so she has another man. But even on her wedding day, we were running a half marathon. So on the 4th of July, on her wedding day, we ran a half marathon. This is just sort of who we are. And you need to know that is my bias as we talk about structure and systems as we go through today. You also need to know that, or I think it would be helpful for you to know that I have this connection to my son, and we have a connection to nature. And that is why we're back up here in the Pacific Northwest. We love going up to Whistler. We love backpacking. And so I feel at home here. So the fact that I'm sitting here today with you absolutely fills my heart. The other thing I thought it'd be fun, just because I have your attention and trying to help everybody feel good through these times, is almost 2 years ago, it'll be 2 years in August, I became a grandpa. And yes, I do think I am the best grandpa in the world. And of course, they've been up here to Seattle before the pandemic hit. So I'm very connected to nature. I'm happy to be here. Basically the two things in my life now are Kimberly, my girlfriend, and nature. And that is what connects us on a regular basis. And we are very happy to be back up here in the Pacific Northwest. And basically we are enjoying it already, even in the winter. And what you can see in these photos here in the little circles is we now have a dog that goes everywhere with us. So that is my life, and I want to bring that to you and maybe just give you a little, we can all look forward to having that back and the trails opening up again, our trail system, because it's a system, it's all connected, isn't it? And so there's systems thinking, and then there are systems in our practices. Now, systems, I think that word is boring as all heck. I can't, if we said, hey, let's go spend a day with, outside the office and work on systems in the practice, I have to tell you that bores the thought of that, of the word, bores the crap out of me. Except when I think, oh, wait a minute, if we were going to spend a day out of the office or several days out of the office talking about how energy and information flows through the office and how it's all connected, now I'm a little bit more excited. And let's create some guidelines as opposed to rules. So I would like some guidelines on how energy and information flows through the office. That's a system. So every time I use the word system now, if you could quickly replace it in your head to, instead of this boring word called systems, you just quickly say, oh, a guideline of how energy and information flows through the office. I think we're going to do a lot better and have a lot more energy around it. So, because here's what happens. Some of us get into dentistry and we either buy a practice or we're an associate in a practice and we have an experience. And we have this experience and we go, oh, I guess that is the system that is happening here. And therefore, that is the expectation that I have when I come to work every day. Now, said quickly, you have an experience, and that's just the expectation you have when you walk in every day. It is what it is. My hope for all dental practices is that we actually have an expectation, an idea of what optimal would look like for all of us. What does optimal look like for you? That would be my expectation. And then let's create a system to support that, a guideline of how energy information flows to support that. And that then would be our experience. And when we put the time into that, when we actually put the effort in to create these guidelines of how energy information flows through the office, it looks more like this. We have an expectation, and that is the experience we have. Now, through this pandemic, this is the first time I've always known and professed that there are some core critical systems that if we at least take an intentional look at all of these, our practice will be more predictable and probably more fun and probably profitable as well. So these have always been my critical systems, but I was thinking about the order in which I wanted to share them with you today for intention, as you will see. And I thought, oh my God, I looked at these and I got through them and I said, this is a mnemonic you'll never forget. Everybody's going to remember these 7 systems because it's just pumfakitaba. I mean, who is not going to remember pumfakitaba? so you've got it forever now. So these are your core 7 systems in an order that makes a lot of sense for me. So there is your mnemonic for that. You won't forget it. Let's start off right away. The one I really wanted to start off with was actually the patient handoff. Now, that's a big, broad term, and a patient handoff can be anything. But I started with this because this really is, any handoff is a handoff of energy and information, isn't it? It's basically me telling somebody what has happened with the patient or an experience I just had. And then that person has their own experience with the patient, and they might have to tell somebody else in the office about the experience that the patient has had before they saw them, when I saw them, and then what happened when this person saw the patient, and then the information that the next person might need and want. So there's a way that we need to create optimal energy and information flow for a patient handoff. That's really all it is. Energy and information flow, except I don't want to have to guess at it. I don't want to have to wonder what the front office person wants when I come up from hygiene. I don't want to have to wonder what the doctor wants when the assistant comes in the room. I don't want to be the assistant who wonders what information the doctor wants when he or she comes in the room. You see, if we know that 98.6 degrees is the optimal temperature, then we know that 99 degrees, there's something that's a little off, or that 96 degrees, there's something a little bit off. We wouldn't know if it's off unless we know what optimal is. And that's exactly what we're doing with the patient handoff. I'll tell you a quick story to set this up a little bit. And that is that when I was in my practice back in Portland at the time, that particular practice in Portland, we were working on creating systems in our team meetings, which we'll also talk about. And Cindy, my front office person, said, "Hey, Kevin, could we, when we have our meeting this week, is it okay if we talk about the way the patient comes from hygiene up to me?" So we call that just a point A to point B. It doesn't have to be this big behemoth of a system. It's just one little part of the system that we'd like to get some clarity in. And we can do that on a routine basis. So I said, "Of course, Cindy, I'll put that on the agenda." So we had the agenda, everybody knew what we were going to talk about. And Cindy, I said, "Okay, Cindy wants to talk about the patient coming from hygiene up to her." I said, "So let's have it, Cindy. Why do you want to talk about it?" And Cindy goes, "Well, basically, one of the things I'm noticing is sometimes all of a sudden, Shazam, the patient's there from hygiene, surprise, and I didn't even know the patient was coming. And if I just had a little bit of warning, that would be helpful." And I said, "Yeah, you guys, give Cindy some warning. She needs to know when the patient's coming up." And Cindy goes, "Yeah, like about 4, maybe 3 or 4 minutes warning." I said, "Yeah, give her 3 or 4 minutes warning." And Michelle, my hygienist, said, "Well, okay, I can do that." And Cindy goes, "Well, hang on, there's more. And she goes, "Also what's happening is sometimes when the patient comes up, they don't know what was done for sure and what is the next thing. And I don't know for sure." And I go, "Yeah, Michelle, tell Cindy what was happening, what you did and what's happening." And Michelle goes, "Oh my God, Cindy, I would love to do that for you, except I'm not clear on it." And I go, "Yeah, Michelle, you got to get clear for Cindy, don't you?" And Michelle goes, "Yeah, I would be clear for Cindy if you didn't just get done with your exam and push the auto eject button and go see your next patient." And I said, "Yeah, Michelle, so we got to make sure you have oh, wait a minute. I'm not giving you the information you need." So you get the idea here. And what happened, and this is just sort of the beginning of what we're going to talk about for the rest of our time together here, is we came up, and we're going to talk about flowcharts and how we create them. But what I want you to see here is we just had to have this vision of optimal. And this was back in the day of Dentrix, and it was, yeah, the referral is filled out if there's a referral to a specialist, and the presenter is filled out. The treatment plan is clear. And after that, the doctor has to ask the assistant with hygiene or the hygienist, "If you have any questions." Michelle goes, "If you could just, before you leave the room, Kevin, ask me, do I have any questions?" And I go, "Oh, well, that's pretty easy." So I'll say, "Michelle, before I leave and see my next patient, do you have any questions?" Michelle goes, "That'd be awesome." And then Cindy goes, "Now you can," what we were using pop-up at the time, as you can see there, inter-office messaging. She goes, "Now, if everything's clear, pop me up and that'll give me a few minutes to get organized." And, oh, this is beautiful. And now I leave, you see, and that's when I leave, and there's no other time to leave but right now. Don't hang out anymore, get out. I don't need you anymore, leave me alone. And then you see the "any questions" in quotes. That is now the hygienist or the assistant says to the patient, Before we go see Cindy up front, do you have any questions or need clarity on what happened today or what the next steps are? Because Cindy said, I am not getting clarity. The patient doesn't know. So we said, well, let's ask this. And then the assistant or the hygienist in the operatory is going to say to the patient, well, perfect. If you don't have any questions, let me just review. Here's what we did today. Here's what's next, blah, blah, blah. And now you see we go to Cindy. And after we go to Cindy, Cindy goes, this is awesome. Sure, bring them to me. And then if you don't mind, just one more time, verbalize what was done and the next appointment. And if we're going to refer out to the specialist, periodontist, endodontist, oral surgeon, orthodontist, et cetera. So you get the idea there. Well, let me tell you, that was the last time that there was ever a lack of clarity or appreciation for what we all needed for that particular part of the patient handoff. That is how energy and information flows. Well, that was my practice though. For a lot of practices, it's different for every practice. So for your practice, you can start to create optimal, but you don't want to do it on Word or with a pen, I don't think. With the practices I work with, we start with stickies. And we start step one, what's step one, and what's point A and what's point B, and let's fill in everything in the middle. And we do it with stickies because sometimes you're like, well, that was stupid. Or you're like, well, no, that one goes here, not here. Or wait, let's add to this one. So we do it with stickies, throw them out, move them all over the place. And once we get this clear vision of what optimal looks like from your point A to point B in this patient handoff, wherever it is, now if we want, we can actually transfer that into something that looks a little easier to read. And you've got something that you can, this is one practice that I've been working with, and here's another practice that I've been working with. And the cool thing is that they can now refer back to this on a regular basis and say, man, you know, it's going great, but it's not perfect. Where is the spot that's not perfect? This is good, this is good, this is good. Oh, it's right here that we need a little more clarity. And so you can start this while you're home right now and start just jotting down, what does optimal look like for you from a point A to point B in a patient handoff? What energy and information do you need? I would be remiss if I didn't take a half a step back right now and say that this is not what it looks like. It is not all about you. I know this is hard for you to hear. It's hard for all of us to hear. It's not about you, because this is what we would call a self-centered practice, which was fine in the 50s and 60s. Seriously, it was. But what I want you to see here is that if all of our focus is on the doctor, you see everybody on the outside of the circle, the assistant, the associate, the hygienist, the front office, your ceramist, they all have their own needs and challenges and objectives. And this is the way it was back in the day. It's all about me. And then in the 70s and 80s, when things changed and we actually needed more hygienists because we had dental benefits and we had to start looking at it more like a business, you see the same thing here. We all have our own needs and challenges and objectives, but they were all focused on the business. It was all about the business, and we were all looking in at the business. We were all on the outside looking in at the business. And then as the 80s came on, we started using this terminology. Oh, I have a patient-centered practice, and that feels a lot better for you. But what I want you to see is we all still have our own needs and challenges and objectives, and we're all looking in on the patients, focused on the patient. We're on the outside of the circle. Could you imagine if your doctor walked in, if you walked in, if it's all doctors on the call today, and you walked in and you said, you know what, I do have my own needs and challenges and objectives, but assistant, I know you have your own needs and challenges and objectives. What can I do for you to help you do your job to the best of your ability? And you said the same to the hygienist. You have your own needs and challenges and objectives. What can I do for you today to help you do your job to the best of your ability? And you get the idea. This thought process started in the late 90s with called systems thinking, basically. And it got some momentum by a guy by the name of Peter Senge, who wrote Fifth Discipline and Presence, and is one of the authors on triple focus, way ahead of his time. And he started looking at systems when we started looking at it this way. The Arbinger Institute wrote a book that's called Leadership and Self-Deception, because what we thought a leader was certainly is not what it is, especially in the 21st century. They took that in Peter Senge's learnings of the mid-1990s, and what it really is called is called outward mindset. Now, there's a lot of different terms, but this is a nice book that I think this is another thing you could be doing while you're home, with nothing else to do except watching webinars and working on the practice. But Basically, this outward mindset is a way we create a system for asking each other, what do you need to do your job to the best of your ability? Because I know you have your own needs and challenge objectives. So could you imagine if we're creating a system like we did from the patient handoff that I described at my office, and as opposed to it's all about me, we said, oh, that's your need and challenge objective. Now I know that, because that's what happened. The front office, Cindy looked at all of us and said, what do you need to do your job to the best of your ability? But see, my hygienist also looked at Cindy and said, what do you need to do your job to the best of your ability to get that patient from hygiene out to you? And the assistant said, oh my God, I now know what you need to do to get that patient out to you. I know what you need to get the patient out to you. And thank you for asking me what I need to get the patient out to you. In the end, the system that we created was a team-centered system. It actually wasn't about the patient at all. Now, I know that scares you because you don't see the patient listed there at all, except when we have a team-centered system, we all know what optimal looks like, and we all know what we need to do to go from point A to point B, and what everybody else needs to do their job to the best of their ability. You can imagine who has an amazing experience in your office. It is the patient. So we start looking at these team-centered systems. Now let's come back to the system for a minute and look at just the patient handoff, any patient handoff. It can be from the front to the back. It can be from hygiene to moving into another operatory. It can be anything in your office, any point A to point B. But you know what you're going to see? You also, because we're starting to be entrepreneurs in the practice, we actually have some metrics that show if it's working. So, and these aren't just numbers. By the way, these are all real numbers of practices I work with. I've changed the names to protect the innocent, but these are all real numbers. And they're not just numbers. We think, is it all about the money? Gosh, no, it's not all about the money. But the numbers of the practice tell the story of what we think is going on. And when we start to make changes, there's going to be something that we can see as different, some metric that we can see as different. And it might be that when we actually start, and it might be, and it may not be, it may be when we start actually having some clarity with the patient handoff, some efficiency, how energy and information flows through the office, that maybe we do see production go up because we're just more efficient and clear on what happens. And you may see that your gross production per day average goes up because there's less messing around, there's more clarity. You're like, you know, when we started doing that, look at how the numbers changed. It's not about the money, but the numbers do not lie. And that's what I want us, as we go through the rest of the systems now, let's keep that in mind. So patient handoff for you can be anything from any point A to point B, get some clarity on what optimal looks like for you, create maybe a little flow chart, and then you're going to share that with your team when you go back, and they're going to tell you all the things you missed, but it's going to be a great starting place. And that's what a team-centered system really is. But the second system we had of our beautiful mnemonic that is one of the 7 critical systems is your morning huddle. And the morning huddle really is, for me, it's about connection. It's about love. It's about community. It's about all of us as a team coming together to start our day. It doesn't have to be much more elaborate than this. Think about this. Is the information presented this morning in our morning meeting relevant and going to impact today? Because if it's not, why are we talking about it this morning? And are we regurgitating information from the schedule that everyone else can read? Do we need to go down everybody's schedule and go, yep, Kevin's coming in at 8 for a crown on 12 and a DO on 13. Everybody's like, no, I got that right here. Why are we all reading that to each other, right? So we don't want to just read what everybody else can read. My big question is, are we starting the day we want to? And is the information presented this morning relevant and going to impact our day? That's different for every team. So same thing, these are 2 different teams that I've been working with, that we create a flow, this very transparent, predictable, systematic approach to how we want to start every day. So on the left, you can see it's the assistant that goes through a few things, the hygienist goes through a few things, the admin goes through a few things, the doctor has nothing to do with the morning huddle. She's there, but doesn't have anything to do. On the right-hand side, you can see we decided we want to talk about what went well yesterday and what could have been better. That's going to be relevant. A hygiene, you see it, use list. You see this is messy writing. You can read through that for yourself. The clinical assistant has a section. Kristen, the front office, has a section. And then we all talk about patient flow concerns, et cetera, et cetera. Well, that could end up looking like this. you see on the top left-hand corner, it's a reminder of why we have our morning huddle. What are we looking for? What are our goals for the morning huddle? And then we've got our flow, and it's this checklist, bam, 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 bam. Who's doing it? And it's the same every day so that we're prepared every day. My morning huddle this is from my practice years ago. This is what it was. It was a deep breath check-in. The hygienist went down her column with just those 3 bullet points. Assistant went down our column with those 3 bullet points. We looked at a couple of things about today's schedule. We had a couple of monthly reminders. And then on Tuesdays, we looked at statistics from the previous week. On Wednesdays, we looked at the general business statistics. And on Thursday, we looked at other statistics, because there are some things we want to stay current on, but we sure as heck don't need them every day. It's not like a lot changed in 24 hours. So this was sort of our flow, but it's different for every office. But what I want you to see and remind you is it was about how we support each other. We came up with this because it was team-centered. It was what we needed to do our job to the best of our ability. And that was our goal for our morning huddle. Everybody's is different. And you can work on that while you're home right now, all by yourself, and then you can share it with your team. This is what you think might be important on the morning huddle, and what's the structure you need and why. The next one that seems so simple, but it's a great thing to do while we're home hanging out with COVID, or hopefully without COVID, is financial arrangements. And it really doesn't have to be so difficult. None of this has to be so difficult. We just have to do it intentionally. And financial arrangements really, for me, are they clear? Are they clearly documented options? And are we addressing them before we schedule treatment so there's no confusion later on? That's really all it is. And right now tomorrow you can go, oh, do I have them? Are they clear? And when are we using them? And depending on where you are in your practice, that's why it's different. For the practice on the left, they might be trying to dial their practice back, and they just have a few options. And that's really what they're willing to offer. Practice on the right might be willing to do a couple of more things because they're really trying to grow their practice and help people overcome the barrier of money. When I was director of the faculty practice, again, we have to know where it fits in. So I thought I would show you this. When do we give it to them? What does it look like? So you can see on the top left, from the time the patient calls all the way to the actual financial payment policy that we shared with the patients, and when did they do it? And it was before we scheduled any appointments. And that might be different in your office, but we need clarity together as a team. And it's interesting, the metric that we might see, well, it's amazing. When we start having clear financial arrangements, you might see, for instance, on your accounts receivable, the 0 to 30, you're like, holy crap, Kevin, this must be terrible. That's up to 103,000. Except I might say that's perfect because we made an agreement 2 months ago that we were going to start helping the patients overcome the barrier to money and start offering a little bit more in-house financing. And I would expect to see that, and that means that we're doing it. And the fact that we're crystal clear on our financial arrangements now, you might see that the 60 to 90 or over 90 starts to go down because we're clear, we know where the money is, there's nothing left out there, there was no surprises for anybody. You see, the metrics follow the systems that we create and when we follow them up with intention. But it's not about the money, is it? It's just that the numbers don't lie. The numbers tell a story of what's going on in your practice and if the changes you're making are working or not working. The fourth one, this big behemoth, oh my gosh, really? Continuing care. Are we going to talk about that? We don't have all day. We only had an hour here. Except really, continuing care, think about it this way. By the way, who's saying this to who? Are you saying this to the patient, or is the patient saying this to you? Who's afraid of getting lost? I think the patient's afraid of getting lost, and I think we're afraid of losing the patient. I think it goes both ways. So before we talk about how we're getting lost, this is one of my favorite systems because we have to take a step back and say, well, how many people do we need to keep track of? How many should be coming in? So when you look here, if there were 1,419 active patients, then you would expect to see, in a perfect world, you would see a sixth of those every month, which in this particular practice, again, this is a real true story, would be about 212. Would be about 237. But this practice only saw 212. And you're like, well, Kevin, that's not so bad. Well, I agree with you because you're not going to see everybody every month. You've got some people who are have scaling and root planing. You've got some people who are coming in every 3 or 4 months. So you're never going to bat 1,000 on this. But what should you be batting? If you have 237 patients to see and you only saw 212 of them, you could probably do a little bit more. But what about this? That was just a snapshot of what was happening in this practice. Because if we really had 237 patients to see and we were only seeing 68%, 73%, 74%, 78%, what things would you like to know? Because if we're going to create a continuing care system per se, we better know what our expectations are. What is going on in the first place? Because the numbers don't lie, do they? Something is not right about this. We need to see 237 patients. Is it that we actually don't have enough hygienists? So we're down to like 63, 66, and 56 on this particular practice that you see in the red. Do we not have enough hygienists? Well, let's take a look. So again, the identities have been saved. So these 3 hygienists in this practice, their names are, what do I call them? Healthy, happy, and genuine. So healthy, happy, and genuine. We look and we have to look at what's called over here on the left, capacity utilization. How busy are the hygienists? Are they sitting around all day long, or are they with patients? Well, these hygienists are actually with patients most of the time. So now you say, is it that we need another hygienist? Is that why we're not seeing enough patients? Maybe. I would have never known. But what if we saw that their capacity utilization was really down? And you're like, why are they sitting around so much? Well, then what you might take a look at would be these graphs here for healthy, happy, and genuine. And that would be how much of their time is being canceled. And why is it being canceled? And are they being recovered? Is that why they're sitting around? Is that why we're not seeing all the patients we were supposed to see? Is because people are canceling and they're not being recovered? Well, I go upstream right now and I go, why are they being canceled? It doesn't have to be so complicated. It's probably more than our software confirmation. Are we reaching out to connect with the patient? And what you see in red there is what we call RTR, reason to return. We integrate a system it's a system in and of itself called RTR. It's the reason to return. When are we telling the patient and reinforcing to the patient the reason to return for their continuing care? It's not just to be healthy, there's a reason. And do we have that easily accessible to us, and are we all using it on a regular basis? Well, now we go, oh, that's what's happening. So if we do that, what might change? What metrics might change? Well, now you start looking at hours canceled and you start to see them go down quite a bit because we integrated this reason to return. Numbers don't lie. They tell a story as to what's going on. But we're still down to 83%. We're like, man, everything seems to be going great. Capacity utilization, everybody's up. Our cancellations are going down. We seem to have enough hygienists. Oh, wait a minute, we forgot. Is this number right? Do we really have 2,901 active patients, which would make it so we should be seeing 484? Is that number even right? And we go back into our software and say, how many active patients do we really have? How many people have actually come in the last 12 months, individual patients? Because that is the number we should be looking at to see how many patients we should be seeing. Then we look at capacity utilization, we can look at cancellations. And now that we've got this idea as to what we should be seeing, who we should be seeing, now we can sit down and do the easy part, which is maybe a flow chart that looks like this. And again, this was mine. I'm just going to share mine right now from way a long time ago, which is, you know, from the time they call, down the right side is when they don't schedule, and down the left side is when they do schedule. And you see the arrows all connect to one another until all the way down at the bottom right, there's an inactive letter. And sometimes then that finally gets them to schedule. And then sometimes we send it out and that's the end. That's the only time the patient leaves the practice. The only thing I would change today, just to be clear with you on this particular flowchart, is I would have a name by all of those. So who is doing the continuing care list? Who is making the calls? Who's doing that? But this was a long time ago as I was learning. So that's the only thing I would add today. The next one that I thought might be fun for you to work on while you're home, and this one really is great, it's basically your internal marketing. When I think of internal marketing, I think really of internal marketing is, do I have this vision on the left of what I want my practice to look like? Because who do I want to market to? Who do I want to have? What type of practice do I want to have? which helps me decide on what type of patients I want to market to. And then on the right, you see, I promise you live in a world of abundance. They're out there. We just have to let them know that we're here, and that is your internal marketing. And we could spend, of course, all day on this one too, but I thought this would be good for our short time together and for us to work on while we're home, spending some time on the practice, which is, you know, all the way up from, you think, man, when am I helping people know who I am and what we would like to do? Well, that starts from your website, telling them who you are and your phone intake. And I put in red right there again, your why. Because if you don't know your big global why as to what you want to be and how you want to be perceived, then you won't be able to tell them who you are and why you're different. So that's a big part of your internal marketing. And then, of course, we want to tell them what to expect and differentiate expectation versus experience. And then welcome to the practice. Thank you for referring. And are you taking new patients? So these might just be your core 4 internal marketing strategies. That might be all it is do they know our why and when are we telling them? Are we making sure we welcome them to the practice? Are we thanking them for referring them? And are we telling them we're taking new patients? Now, that's the core. Now, for most practices, you're going to come up again with your own. What are the things, what are your key touch points to where you want to help patients know that you're taking patients, reinforce them sending new patients, and maybe a couple of other things. So for instance, this particular practice that I've been working with, they've got a section on the left of new patients. How are they reinforcing new patient flow with the new patients? Letting them know they're different. In the middle, they would like to get more patients from their specialists. Are they doing that? And then finally, their existing patient marketing. So we broke it up into 3 different ones like that. And it wasn't so overwhelming. How do we track it? It can look something like this. So for me, the 4 areas that I look at with internal marketing is, are we differentiating ourselves? Are we reinforcing getting new patients in? What are we doing on social media? And what I call other correspondence. And how many do we expect to do in April? Who's going to do them? And then at the end of the month, how many did we actually do? And what's our grade? And you can see in the bottom down there that the grade for April was 87%. Out of 117 things we said we were going to do, we did 102 of them. Now, some of you are going, that sort of sucks, Kevin. Well, I will tell you that I rarely got any grade above an 87 from the time I started kindergarten to the time I got out of dental school and through my master's program. 87s to me are spectacular. But again, you got to remember where I come from. Everything comes hard for me. So that's a pretty good month for me. Maybe it's not for you, and that's what you have to decide with your practice. But when we start doing this with intention, what metrics might we see? Well, again, the numbers don't lie. They tell the story of what's going on in the practice. When we start doing this internal marketing very intentionally, you would actually start to see, oh my gosh, look at how it went from 25, 24 all the way to 41 to 48. This is working, but I would say it's more than that. It's where are you getting your patients from? You see, I wanted more patient referrals and more specialist referrals. You see those numbers go up. And you know what? I don't necessarily like the patients I'm getting just from advertising because I like the ones that are referred. So I wouldn't mind seeing those go down and the others go up. And that's exactly what we saw on this particular point. But we've got to have metrics to track it to see if our systems are working. So that is basically a snapshot of internal marketing. You can easily work on that one, and every practice every practice could have at least some idea as to what they're doing with intention for internal marketing. Now, I threw team meeting in next to last here because everything we've talked about before this point, we have to have a way to work on and keep track of and keep refining, don't we? But what are team meetings really? This is a system in and of itself. It's sort of like the morning huddle, remember? It could be a time for us to stay connected. It could be a time for us to be in community and support each other and reinforce our team-centered system. So it might look like this. It might just be a time for us to create a safe environment and connect with each other, and to review our current systems, and to create new systems when we're not distracted, and to see how we're doing with the practice, the pulse of the practice, to review what we would call our critical practice statistics. Now again, it's different for every practice. You see here on this particular screen, I always answer these questions: the what, the why, the who, the when, the where, and finally the how. The why why is really important. Why are we having a team meeting? For this team that is in, it's a team in Northern California, they thought, you know, we want to have it for structure, for clarity, for unity, for knowledge, for calibration, to review goals. They had to come up with their why. And then when they did it, what they came up with is on the right-hand side, as you see, they had their bullet points, and it was going to be the same every single meeting. So we picked a topic, how long we needed for every topic, who was going to be in charge of that topic, and then finally what order we wanted it to be in for our team meeting. And that was specific for that practice. For my practice for years, it looked like this. For what was appropriate for us, it was an afternoon once a month. But we knew what it was every month. There were no surprises. It was transparent. We were prepared. The agenda went out always 2 to 3 days in advance so that we were all prepared and excited for it. And we really were. And as opposed to a complaint session or somebody that gets blindsided or didn't see that coming, it becomes something we look forward to every month because it's predictable, it's transparent, and we get some work done that we get to try on as soon as we go back to work the next day. So team meetings become really fun and are different for every practice. And you can start to think about, maybe you have one, a lot of us do. Is it what you want? Is it what optimal looks like? And do we want to refine that at all? Now, as we come through the seventh, what I would consider the last of the critical systems in the practice that we could be looking at, and that is block scheduling. And we're going to keep it simple. Just do this. I'm going to tell you exactly what to do. I'm going to tell you exactly how many patients see, when you should see them, and that's a pile of crap because every practice is different. But you can have what you would call block scheduling, except, and it really is a game changer in the practice, but maybe what we could do ahead of time is answer this question. What is enough? Do you know how much money is enough for you to keep your practice going? Do you know how many patients you need to keep your practice going? Do you know how much time you need in your practice for some of the things you do in your practice? Because if you don't know how much money is enough, how many patients are enough, and how much time is enough, how will you know how to schedule your practice? Well, how do we know how much enough is enough? Well, we could start like this, and this is again another team up in Minnesota that I've been working with. And you know, you could start with, okay, what days we want to be here? You know, that is, we could say, you know, who's going to be here on what days? Well, that's okay. And you could see on the right-hand side, we started saying, well, how much do we need to make per day? Well, there's a way that we started coming up with this for this particular team. And I want to review that before we start creating your block schedule. And that is, if we actually take, let's say for instance, your P&L from the previous 12 months, it can be a rolling 12, right up until the time the pandemic hit. Take that profit and loss statement and just go, how much does it cost to take the practice going right now? If we didn't change a thing, if we got no more efficient whatsoever. And then we're going to start to look at some numbers very intentionally to see what do we need to schedule for. So for this particular practice, what it took to keep the practice running, the doors open, was 880,000. And then let's say that you said, okay, I would like as a dentist to make 200, you get to put your own number in there, 250,000. And then I want to have a retirement of 25,000. But then I want to have a savings account for the practice for when the compressor breaks or I need a new Cavitron, and that's going to be about 10%. And it can be 5% or 10%. And so now you know what you actually need to collect, don't you? To keep everything going. It doesn't have to be so difficult. And that would mean that every month it would be about just under $100,000. Now, if you knew, because you planned ahead, that you were going to work 170 days, you would know that you need about $7,053 every day in the practice. Yet there's a caveat to this, because if you knew you needed to collect 1.1, would you say that that's exactly what you needed to produce? Maybe, if you were collecting 100% of everything you produced. But what if, and please, I hope I don't offend anybody, I am a fan of whatever practice is appropriate for you, including what I call the hybrid practice. I think if you're in a place where what makes sense for you is to sign up with some benefit companies, because that's what it's taking to get your practice where you want it, great. But you need to know that you might be writing off, let's say for instance, 20%. If that's the case, you need to know this, that you're writing off you're writing off almost 20%. Well, if you're writing off 20% of that, then actually what you need to collect 0.1, you actually need to produce 1.4. And if that's the case, what you really need to produce is 119 a month. Now you know that's what you need to produce. And if you know that that's what you need to produce, and you know how many days you're going to work, you know exactly how much your hygiene department needs to be producing, and that means how much per day. You know exactly how much the doctor needs to be producing, and you know what that is per day. Now, if you know all of that, and you can, it's not that hard. We just did it that fast. It's just having some fun with some numbers. You now can sit down and start to create your block schedule, because if you know how many new patients, then you get to put them where you want them. Where's your favorite place? That's the first thing you put in your block schedule. If it's 8 a month, where do you want them? How long do you want them? Because you know how much time it takes, you know what it needs. And then you have hygiene appointments to support those, including SRPs for some of those. And then you come down to the third part, as you see on the left-hand side, which is your high production. In this particular practice, they like to call them rock, sand, and water. And you can call it green, blue, and red. You can call it whatever you want. But this practice wanted to call it rocks. Great. I would, if you knew that you needed to do $5,200 a day as a dentist in this practice, then in your big high production spot, you would like to get about 80% of that. And you get to decide where you want it. Are you an afternoon person or a morning person? And then you go over to the sand. How do we fill that in for the other 20%? Well, we've got appliances, we've got whitening, we've got anything from like 1 to 2 composites. And they started to track that down there. And then the water, the things that don't make any, is crown seats and consult, etc. And then don't forget, in your block schedule, because we just talked about team meetings, you better block that in there just like you do your new patients, because that is gold. And that is how we start to create a block schedule. We know how many we want, we know when we want them, we block it all out there, we know that we're actually scheduling for production so we can stay profitable, and we start putting those patients in there with some intention. And we can look at it, if there's different days with different doctors, like this was quite the complicated practice, then it is different for every day. Where do the new patients go on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday when there's 2 doctors in there? What about when there's 1 doctor in there? What about when there's 3 hygienists instead of 2 hygienists? Great, we map it out, and then we've got something that looks like a beautiful block schedule every day that's appropriate for what we want. And when we start creating this, how do we know it's working? Well, this one's pretty straightforward. It depends on what you're looking for. Maybe you want to slow your practice down. You would see it, but what I would expect to see is the production per day, if that's what we wanted, to go up. And you see that in this particular practice here. And when we block schedule with intention, you can see Dr. Awesome here. All this, you see things change. You see his capacity utilization is up to almost 100%. He's booked great, but what you see is his patient visits number is down, while his production per patient, his production hour is up. See, because we did this with intention, this is what we would expect to see. But if the numbers don't reflect it, we get to go back and find out why it's not working or what we missed. There is always a better way. And this year, as we lost Pete Dawson, and in these crazy times right now where we need hope, I happened to be in Pete's office, I think the week after this book was published, and I think there is always a better way. There's a better way, and we can continue to refine it. You could sit down right now and think about, what is the optimal flow for a new patient to come through your office? How do you want it to look? What is optimal for you? If you do a lot of appliances like I did, this was mine from my practice, how does it work? Because we had a couple of mishaps where this appliance wasn't ready yet. And all we had to do was sit down in one team meeting and talk about what happens from the time we treat it to the time the patient has their 3rd follow-up visit with me. That's all I really wanted to know. If you're trying to integrate airway into your practice, this is a practice in Philadelphia I've been working with. What does it look like for them from the time we screen to the phone call to the first appointment and through? We just need some clarity, don't we? Some clarity on that. This is not one of the key 7 systems, but what I want you to see is, in the end, when we start this was from the faculty practice at the dental school. In the end, what you see here, every one of those clouds, if you can't read it, is a system. It's scheduling flowchart, financial arrangement flowchart, within the patient appointment flowchart, hygiene flowchart, referral to specialist flowchart. And you can see how it's a systems thinking, isn't it? It's all related. And it takes time and it takes effort. And right now you've got time, and you may as well put in some effort right now, because these, my friends, are really the critical 7 systems. And don't forget, it's easy to remember. It's the Pumpfakitaba. And you'll know it forever. But as you create these systems on your own right now, I'm doing a lot of meetings with teams when it makes sense right now. But if you do it on your own, don't forget, when we come back to practice, you get to actually ask them, what do you need to do your job to the best of your ability? Let's finish creating the system so that we're all clear on our point A to point B. That is a team-centered practice. And when we have a team-centered practice, you start to use words like this. You have a sense of respect. We trust each other more. We live in more humility. We actually have a sense of love. I'm okay talking about it. And we can be we can be our vulnerable selves. And how do we feel every day in the practice? We feel vital. We walk in feeling good and we walk out feeling good because we got to be our very authentic selves. It takes some work, but it really is something special. Now, I support Timmy, I support Val, I support Gary, I support everybody in WAGD. And I am so proud to be back up in the Pacific Northwest. This is my home. And if there's anything I can do to support you in these times, or just anything, I think we need to support each other. And I know we talk about it every day right now, but this is a big reset. It's a big reset for us all. What's important to you? And what is important to me is to give back and to help create happy, healthy teams. So please let me know what I can do. And I appreciate all of your time today. And even though I can't see anybody here, my heart is full because I feel community. I really do. So thank you for having me. And I don't know how I'll stop sharing right now, Timmy.
Sure, sounds good.
Yeah.
Why don't we hit you with a few questions? Thank you very much. That was great. I have some spare time. It looks like that's something I should be working on. So here's one from a student. As students, how can we begin to work on systems while still in school? And it says 87 club or bust, and I'm not sure what that means.
I don't know. Oh, 87 club or bust. The students who 87% are awesome.
Oh,
Yeah, I get that reference. Oh, yes. You're my people. You're my people. Yeah, some of us have a hard. I'm telling you, the whole dyslexia thing that you learn later on, and we just survive to get through. And some of us just need to work a lot harder. That's me. But anyway, it's interesting. What you could work on in dental school is start to think about, one of my favorites is what I call a mini system, because there don't always have to be these big systems. Think about how you would want your appointment to go from the time that you go out to get the patient, maybe to the time that you give anesthetic. What does that look like for you ideal? Because you start to get some clarity. What does optimal look like for you? Or from the time that you take the patient to the front, and maybe you do your own scheduling at UW, but from the time you schedule them to the time they come back. It could be 2 steps, but you start to create these little mini systems, get in the habit of thinking, what is optimal between point A and point B? And do I have a vision of it? And what does it take to get there? You can do that for everything any day, but keep it simple. Don't get overwhelmed, 87, because we get overwhelmed pretty easy. So we've got to pick our easy point A to easy point B and get some clarity. You can add on to it later, but man, I can't, I got to start small. I'm with you, 87. Thank you.
Along those lines, in August 15th, we've got a Crown Preparation 101 course that we do for the students, and they think they're coming to learn how to prep teeth, but no, it's more about the systems of that appointment. So there's...
Hey, can I add to that real quick? Because
Sure.
if there's dental students on here, my system with my assistant, not in dental school, sadly, was we knew, like, for instance, we had to start with 1 crown prep. And if it was on the bottom right, it was, just so you know, assistant, I cut the contacts first. That's the burr I need. And then I do the occlusal reduction. If it's on the bottom right, I do the buccal first, then I go to the lingual. But if it's on the bottom left, I do this. We just went through that so that, man, we were clear. She knew exactly where she needed to retract, because I didn't say, today I think I'm going to start with the buccal reduction and do the contacts 7th. It was a system every time, and our preps get better that way too.
Yeah,
so
yeah, absolutely. From John Lowe, dumb question, but what flowchart app would you recommend, iPad preferred?
Well, okay, a cool one, if you want to spend some time on it, really make them look good. OmniGraffle is a Mac specific flowchart system, but literally you can use Word. Word has arrows and boxes and lines and things, and that's obviously a Mac product as well, Word is. So yeah, so
Yeah.
Mac is OmniGraffle, or I stick to Word for most practices these days.
Terrific. Do you have to discuss your financial goals with your team? I mean, they will know how much you gain every month and they will compare it with their salary. How to
Yeah.
keep them motivated?
Yeah. When we came up with what our goals were, that's for us to see. You get to put your own numbers in there for your retirement, your realistic salary. Now that's a big question. For me, when I talk to Dennis, it is, you have to know what your personal budget is. What does it really take for you and your family to live, to pay your rent? And it's not to have 7 boats on 7 continents. It's like, what you have to know what real is. What is that number? Because if we know that number, and then we put that in, at least we know that our goal comes from a place of keeping it real. It's okay if you make more than that, but that first goal is there. But they don't ever look at that chart. You know where the number comes from. And then when you discuss your goals with the practice, you know they're coming from a place of a business owner, a smart CEO, a smart CFO, and also from a place of you not saying you need to make $4 million a year, but what it takes for you and your family to eat out twice a month and go to the movies and go on a vacation once a year, whatever that is for you. But that's your starting place.
Okay. Lots of thank yous. Lots of it was great. Here's from a young dentist. Any specific advice for a young dentist looking to buy an existing practice?
Well,
Yeah.
yeah. No, actually, the good news is for you, when COVID is over, I think in the first year to year and a half, you're about to see a rush of a lot of people retiring. That seems to be the leading trend right now that we're following. Sad for the sellers, good for the buyers. It's about to become a buyer's market for a while in dentistry.
Okay. Mason Cooper, my staff and I have watched some of your videos on the Sphere site. Has anyone told you you look like Will Ferrell's long lost brother?
You are funny, and I'm sorry some of those videos are terrible. I'm a human being, and so today was probably terrible for a lot of you too. I embrace my humanity. And yes, I have been told that, and a lot of other funny things. So I think it's yeah, and some of them are not. Who's the especially as I haven't cut my hair in a long time right now. Who's the Texas pastor that's always on TV?
Oh yeah, he's good. What's his name?
Those of you who know it,
Yeah.
I get that way. When my hair gets really long and
Yeah.
poofy like it is right now and curly, I get that one. So yeah, that's a
Oh,
good question.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Great information, Kevin. Outward Mindset by Arbinger is a phenomenal resource for
Joel Osteen. Somebody chimed in.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's him. We use it for all our team training events now. Do you have a favorite software for measuring and tracking practice analytics?
No. I work with a lot. There's dental. I don't endorse any of them. I use Dental Intel with a lot of practices, practice by numbers with a lot of practices. They still don't tell me the story the way we need it to be told. So I have multiple spreadsheets. I go old school. It's Excel spreadsheets, but they don't feel so overwhelming because you and your team see the value in them, and you're putting the critical data in on a timely basis instead of going back and going, oh my God, I have so much work to do. So it's creating a system around using some pretty elaborate, I wouldn't say elaborate, but mine seem a little elaborate, but Excel spreadsheets.
Okay.
Yeah.
Another one, how do you share production with team? They have no idea how huge our overhead and our student loans are. Mm-hmm. They think they need to make lots more per hour, but that would be impossible because we have large overheads.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you do share it because it's real. And there's, that's a long topic, but one of the first things I do with teams is talk about the business, not in a way of less than, greater than. It's just, let's remember it's a business and review that there is an overhead and review what percentages. We can't rob Peter to pay Paul every month. That we've got to have money to put towards supplies, money to put towards lab costs, money to put towards team, money to put towards our solvency account, and what percentages go everywhere, and what does that look like? So it's just claiming it. it's talking to them about that it is a business. The reason they don't know that you're overhead is because you haven't told them.
Do you really think it will be a buyer's market? Thanks.
I wasn't making that up. I do. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we're hearing that for some of the people that are working with the WAGD. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you provide bonus for staff, a way to incentivize them?
When it's appropriate, but you certainly do if you've got the profit left over. And how do you know if you're going to have profit or what that number is? You have to know your numbers. You have to know what it costs to run your business. And let's say, for instance, if you knew that you were going to dedicate, let's say 24 to 26% of your collections to your team, because that's sort of an appropriate number for a lot of restorative practices. I mean, there's a variability in there. And everybody got paid and it only took 23%. Guess what you get to do with that other 2%? That's your bonus system. And there's a nice system. It's another system. It's one I love. It's using a rolling 90 day bonus system, so that if you have one really good month, you don't pay everybody out in 1 month because you might wish you had it next month. So it's always an average of 90 days. It's a rolling 90, and it always averages. So if you have a really good month, you actually get a piece of that for 3 months. If you have a really bad month, you get a piece of that for the next 2 months as well. But it's a great bonus system. Works really well. Very, very fair, transparent.
This is just stated. How about when temps come in the office?
Yes. No, I know what you mean. Actually, the really cool thing is when you take some time to create some type of, whether it's a flow chart or a list and what optimal looks like from point A to point B, the benefit is there are some quick things you can say, like here's sort of the way it flows. It also, we don't like turnover in offices, but people do move for good reasons, as well as you don't always have to get fired or quit. But the onboarding process becomes amazing when you've got some of this already done. So when temps come in, it's just as helpful to have some vision of optimal and have it documented in some way.
Okay. Why do you think a lot of dentists would choose to retire and sell their practices after COVID?
Well, one sentence gets a lot of energy.
Yeah.
It's not why do we think, it's we know. It's we know if people were on the edge coming back and trying to revamp up or deal with all of this, they're just like, you know what, I was gonna do it in 2 years. I'm close enough, you know, and there's just a lot of that. It's not apathy. It's just, you know what, and honestly, I know of several people and stories that are like, you know what, I was worried about retiring. I was worried, but I'm doing okay being home right now. So I think if they were getting close and feeling it, they're like, I think it's just the time, and it's going on the market when we come back. Yeah.
All righty. How many front desk staff do you suggest for 2 doctors and 1 hygienist a day trying to produce $10,000 a day?
Well, that's a loaded question. And again, that's very individualized, based on what you're asking, what everybody needs to do their job to the best of their ability. We create optimal, and sometimes optimal is you need another person. Sometimes optimal is that one person. If everybody knows what he or she needs to do, then we I wouldn't say make up for it or compensate. We just know what's optimal for that practice. So I can't say it's 1 or 2 or 3. I think it depends on what optimal looks like for that practice. That's a cheap answer, except it's the truth. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Can you please recommend any books, guides with flow charts for each operation in a dental office, front, back, etc.? Thank you.
No. I love you for asking, and no. People ask me for mine all the time. I give them out, but as a starting place or a guide. But you really have to. You don't have to. You really could create your own, because with your team, because then you own it. You don't want to do what I do. You want to create it with your team, create team-centered systems with your team. And as you all know, you support what you help create. It's a game changer.
Well, maybe 87% of the time I'd want to do it your way. All righty. We're going to hit you with two more questions here.
Okay, got it.
What do you think about long-term employees? They expect a raise every year or so, and after 20 years, it could be cheaper to get 2 new employees than keep the 1 staff member.
Yeah, loaded, great question, loaded question. And that is, once we start to see the cost of turnover and what it takes to retrain somebody to get them in, it doesn't mean you don't do it, but that's all, we always have to factor that in. And there's always something people can do to help grow the practice, to help keep it evolving, to pay for themselves. There's always something to do. The senior team members are very valuable. It's just, we have to maybe keep evolving their value and seeing what they can do to help the practice keep moving in that direction. So I see a lot of value in key team members, keeping them for a long, long time when it's appropriate.
Yeah, you know, here in Seattle, King County, our biggest issue with our membership is really finding staff members. Before COVID, I don't know what that'll look like after, but
It's going to flip also.
Yeah. Okay, kind of the last question here is, it's noticeable my systems suck. I want to hire someone like you, but I don't have any money. What advice moving forward?
You know, that's a great question. You can't afford not to hire somebody. That is why we work. There's so many different things for different people. There are people that they don't think they can afford people like me, and then they find that they can because they get a return on their investment really quickly. That's why I say you can't afford not to. That's why we do things like this. I mean, I love working with teams. It is what I feel like it was my gift. It's what I was born to do. But that doesn't mean that you can't start some of this on your own. Why can't I inspire you today to start doing some things on your own? Or you can look, maybe when you talk it out with, it doesn't have to be me, it can be anybody. And you find out that of course you can afford it. In fact, you can afford it really well because you're going to see the return on your investment.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why with like the WAGD, we're looking at trying to get you in and doing some programs with people. And that would be a nice cost-effective way to get this information. So, and thank you for working with us on that. We're looking forward to having you down at our educational center there. So I guess with that, it's a sunny day here in Seattle. So you probably have a half marathon to run or something like that.
Just a short run. Yeah.
I'm going to say thank you. We're going to put up our slide set there again so everybody can see what's coming up. And and welcome back to the Northwest, sir.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me. And thank you everybody for being part of my community.
Thank you.